We are a mental health facility, and I got into all the spiritual stuff in the first place because I found how helpful spirituality is for the mental health process, okay? Just this week I saw an article about the psychedelic revolution. We're quantum revolution, so I'm interested in revolutions, right? Well, what's the psychedelic revolution? It's the fact that psychedelics are being found to be extremely useful for the mental health process. Incredibly good for depression. You know why that is? Very simply, psychedelics activate serotonin receptors. Serotonin receptors are what get activated when something feels meaningful. If your life feels meaningful, you won't be depressed. Problem is, we experience a lot of depression in the world because a lot of stuff feels meaningless. That's basically what depression is. Talk to anyone, and I've talked to thousands of people as an addictions counselor who has used a psychedelic on a good trip, and they say the same thing. They're overwhelmed with a sense of meaning, this deep connection between all things. They did a study recently using ecstasy. Ecstasy combined with counseling is extremely effective to combat depression. Why is that? Because the person feels meaning in their lives. And then we have to use that in the rest of our lives. You know what else helps with meaning? Enhanced consciousness, spiritual development. That's the whole point of what spirituality is. It expands our minds in such a way that our brains automatically produce more serotonin. So we're going to talk about a couple different concepts, weaving together different philosophies. Again, it's very meaningful to recognize the unity in all these various concepts. Rumi 1,000 years ago had a discourse, Fihi Ma Fihi, which means it is what it is. I've said if I ever got a tattoo, I'd get a backwards Fihi Ma Fihi on my forehead because its teaching is incredibly valuable. It's extremely useful to teach the acceptance of all things and all circumstances and a deep understanding of what's going on, even if it's painful. In his discourse, Rumi talks of a Muhammad story in which Muhammad had just vanquished some enemies, and his enemies were being held captive. And they were languishing in despair, and they were very upset. And they were afraid of the pending slaughter that was to come. And when Muhammad saw them, he laughed. And they said, see, typical guy, right? Just laughing at our despair. You know, we're getting ready to die and you're dancing on our graves. Not so, answered Muhammad. Never would I laugh at the sight of enemies conquered by my hand, or the sight of your suffering. But I do rejoice. In fact, I laugh. Because with inner vision, I see myself dragging and drawing people by collars and chains out of the black smoke of hell into paradise, while they complain and cry, why are you pulling us from this pit of self-destruction into the garden of security? So yes, laughter consumes me. Okay? Why? Because he has inner vision. We can always take these stories literally and make them all facts. Somehow someone was laughing at somebody else's despair. I would never laugh at anyone else's despair either. But once you see what's going on with inner vision, you're going to produce more serotonin. You're going to recognize the value in what's going on in your world. Why you have pain and suffering, and why we have difficult circumstances. Why there needs to be the yin and the yang, and the black and the white, and the tall and the short, and the left and the right, and all of that. Okay? There's suffering that's going to happen. You wouldn't laugh at someone for that, but with an inner vision you would laugh because you see what's happening. We were being dragged out of the pit of despair, and we're being pulled into a garden of security. If you knew that, you would laugh too. So the spiritual teacher Sadhguru says something similar. One of my favorite lines of his is, when the leech is unhappy, I am happy. Now think of a leech. What does a leech do? Sucks your blood, right? Gets on you. If you had an actual leech on you and it was sucking your blood, what would you want to do with it? Tear it off, and it would suffer, and you would feel good because it was suffering, right? So when leech is unhappy, I am happy. Well, you know what sucks your blood? The ego. The human ego. The devil, if you will, is a bloodsucker. And quite literally, the blood is a metaphor for the spirit. The ego inside of each one of us sucks our blood. You can tell when you're suffering. That's what's sucking your blood. And so the pain we feel is actually that thing that's creating the pain. Who we really are, the spiritual self, doesn't experience that. It observes it, but when we're asleep to it, we don't have that peace. We experience the ego on its terms, and it makes you suffer. But it's not you, it's the leech that's actually suffering. So when I tear that off, and I create some pain for the leech, and it can no longer suck my blood, it suffers, and I'm now happy. Well, guess what happens in our process when we do that with the human ego? It's the same thing. It's also painful, especially on something like forgiveness. And patience when we're in a hurry. right? Or we want something to happen now. We want to try to control it. Well, here's it is what it is. This is why Rumi teaches that. You want to get in touch with God? You want to experience the divine presence of it is what it is? Then sit with the fact that what you're going through is perfectly fine on a spiritual level. It is what it is. Might feel painful, but it's actually guiding you somewhere. There's Muhammad's point. You're actually being guided out of a pit of despair into a garden of security. And yet we're crying and moaning about it, okay? That's why it is what it is high-level philosophy, even though people like to mock that. It's also why Sadhguru would say the unhappiness is actually leading to the happiness. First, the unhappiness, which is the ego being ripped off of you, that's what you feel, but it actually makes you feel happy, because now you understand what's actually happening. Most of us like the control aspect of the world, right? We want things to go our way. That's the opposite of is what it is. I want it that way, okay? It needs to go like this. This is how it should be. That's the polar opposite. We're all actually being shown to submit. Islam means to submit. Muslim means one who has submitted. We must submit. We're being forced beside still waters and to lie down in green pastures. We're actually here being shown something. In the Course in Miracles it says the curriculum is mandatory. We're all going to go through this, okay? But we're trying to decide what the curriculum should be. We're trying to say this is how life should go and it should go on my terms. Well, that's ego functioning right there. And yet it's not going to happen. You might want to live to be 207. I don't know any 207-year-olds. You will die. This is memento mori, right? If life were just about gathering physical world materials, Jesus wouldn't say, Mark 8:36, what good is it if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? Great, a lot of good stuff happened to you, but you know what you lost along the way? Your spiritual self. And then at the end of your life, guess what you have to do? You have to give it all up. Where will you be now? You'll be lost, a hungry ghost, looking around for your body. And you're going to want to come back to find all your peeps that are still on earth, because that's what you think you are. But what if you realize you have a spiritual family? What if you raise your consciousness and you realize, oh my gosh, death isn't the end. All my loved ones are still alive. We're spiritual beings having a temporary ego experience. That's going to produce serotonin in your head. I don't need psychedelics for that. That's called wisdom. That's what spirituality teaches us. Why all prophets say the similar types of things. Why Jesus went to the cross, to die, to overcome the grave, to show us you don't need to worry about it. And emphasizing forgiveness along the way, because the ego hates that. All of this comes from Muslim teachings into these Christian teachings, like Mark 8:36, gain the whole world to lose your soul. You have a choice. Everybody does. This is what makes it fair. What do you want to put your focus on? Physical world pursuits or spiritual pursuits? When Peter tried to stop Jesus from getting crucified, Jesus said to him, Satan, get behind me. You're focused on the affairs of man. That is gaining the whole world. You're trying to determine how other people behave so that you can be comfortable. Muhammad would laugh at that, because you're going to have to go through the suffering. What's Buddha's first noble truth? Suffering. This whole thing is a war inside our heads, which is all about the Bhagavad Gita. All of us are going through this, and all of us are going to experience it. Sounds pretty fair to me. You could try to gain the whole world, or you could focus on your spiritual development. In practice, it is what it is. We don't have much choice from a mental health perspective. Again, I try to get people to be comfortable with negative circumstances that happen to them. If it happened in your past, resentment doesn't produce serotonin. If you resist what's happened to you and you wish it hadn't happened to you, you know by your own mental health that it's not working very well. But what if you practice it is what it is? And you accept the circumstances. That's the inner voice Muhammad was talking about. It doesn't mean you submit to a kidnapper, okay? We don't like watch our kids go into traffic and say it is what it is. That's outer voice. Okay? The inner voice understands that there's a deeper sense of peace going on. The outer still acts. In Buddhism, it's called Upekkhā, which is high-level love. And from a detached place, you can act more effectively. That's what's key. Agape is the same thing in Christianity. From an all-embracing, loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength type of love, you'll transmit that energy when you're trying to be influential on the external. But where are we without the inner voice? It's the ego, it's the darkness, and it's the control, and it's ineffective. But from it is what it is, you have this wonderful inner sense of self and this deeper understanding, and you know you're the light of the world and all those various teachings, and now you can go out into the physical world and be effective. It is what it is doesn't mean to just accept your fate. We don't teach kids, well, Jesus said if someone hits you on one cheek, you should offer the other. So if a bully hits you, have him hit you again. We don't teach that stuff. That's not the point of that story. The other cheek is the spiritual cheek. Okay, the other side of yourself. You have the lower physical self and the higher spiritual self. Turn the other cheek means go there, okay? And look at it spiritually. Matthew 10:39, Jesus says, whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. He's talking about two lies right there. Whoever finds his life will lose it? What is he saying? Well, whoever tries to gain the whole world is going to lose their spiritual life. Look at all the comfort I have and all this physical world success. You're not spiritual if you're not seeing both sides. If you're not a peacemaker, if you're not humble, if you're not meek, all those very specific Christian teachings. If you're not practicing it is what it is, or if you don't have the inner vision Muhammad reference, and perhaps most dramatic of all, we have Luke 14:26, when Jesus teaches about hate. Don't ever hear this in church on Sundays, but he says, in order to be my disciple, you must hate your own life. He even says you have to hate your mother and your father and your siblings and your children and all that. He says you have to do that in order to be my disciple. Is he really promoting hate? Or is he distinguishing between the types of lives we have, the physical world life and the spiritual world life? Of course that's what he's doing. He's talking about the ego life we have to hate. This impermanent self that we're going to have to give up. It's going to go. We're going to die. And if you love it and you covet it, it's a false idol. You will spend the rest of your life and then your death being disappointed in the fact that you didn't work on the spiritual stuff. It is what it is, high level. You know what it is? We're all going to die. We have to give up the ego. We have to give up the false physical self. Those who embrace it produce more serotonin in their brains. You can use psychedelics to learn that, or you can just experience it through the natural spiritual process.